Welcome to Glacial Inferno Gaming. My name is Jay. I wanted to put together kind of a final polished guide on the Unbound Ailments dot build that we've been working on for the last week. First off, I wanted to show a huge thanks to all the support and everybody coming out to view the videos and ask questions on Twitch, and it's been nice to see a lot of interest in the build, and hopefully I'm delivering and giving you guys what you come for. So with that, first off, why ailments? And I started this a couple of days before launch when I was first testing out the game, and was just fascinated by the number of ailments in the game that you could apply to an individual monster. So that kind of got me on the path of seeing how many, and how far I could really push the ailments themselves. So with that, quick overview of what we actually do. Primarily, when we come across a pack of monsters, we are firing off an anomaly or two to act as a CC and pull all the monsters together. With our anomaly, we're using stasis and freeze, which helps to hold them in place. Then we're dropping a tier of ethereal with burn and shock chance on top of them, followed by a solar fall now with weakness and freeze. And then we're casting Mark of Impurity to curse and poison, as well as launching a bleeding edge or two with poison and bleed stacks. And that's pretty much the basic rotation, if you will. Just for bosses, it winds up being more we use anomaly to break their break their guard, and then start throwing all the dots on top of them and stack as many bleeding edges as we can, along with the Mark of Impurity. So, quick rundown of the skills that we use. Like I said, we start with the anomaly, where we are running dislocating threads, existential tangle, temporal dilation, echoes of infinity, rending of matter, and auspicious cosmology. And the main reason for that is to be able to cast two of them, which causes enemies to bounce between each other and also helps break the guard of bosses a lot faster. And the multiple pull helps keep them from escaping, is the essential breakdown of it. We do also increase the AoE and extend the duration. Then we are casting Solar Fall with Sunrise, which allows us to not have to channel the spell and just drop it and leave it. I've got Plasmic Eruption on it, but not really sure how much this is adding to it. Just kind of testing it out at the moment. Glare of Judgment to increase the tick rate, and this is mainly to help apply more weakness stacks as well as freeze to keep the enemies immobilized. Then we have the area effect increases over time, and area of effect leaves a trail that damages enemies, which also again helps apply more stacks of weakness and freeze. Then we are applying tier of ethereal. The primary focus here is Scorned by Fire and Stalactite Rain, so we convert it to fire primarily and cause a damage over time, which helps allow more ailments to proc as it's dropping different projectiles. We've also increased the ailment damage, reduced the cooldown on both to cut the cooldown from 4 seconds to 2 seconds. Then we apply our Mark of Impurity, and for now the main thing is a Cursed Blade, which gives us our 10 stacks of Cursed, which I'll explain a little bit more when we get into the ailment stacking, and then allows us to spread it between any enemies within a short area, which helps with the anomaly, bringing everybody together. This is the spread. This is the explosion based on the amount of health damage. This helps with clear, and if we manage to bring down a champion within a group of other enemies, it'll basically wipe everything out, and then reducing the cooldown. And then we have Bleeding Edge, everybody's favorite skill to hate, which unfortunately I'm trying to find a replacement for, but haven't been able to find anything that does as well. Primary modifiers here is Despotic Perseverance, which increases the damage per ailment stack and continues to be thrown after cast, the Unstoppable Momentum. I do also have a taste for Blood, which helps with life sustain with the health regen. Then we have Wicked Swing and Delayed Blade Spin, which allows us to drop it directly on the enemies. I have played around a little bit with Plague Burst and used that as well, mainly for clear. Didn't really serve much other purpose. Another skill that we have been testing that is at least viable, but not nearly as overpowered, if you will, is Gunslinger's Brand, by switching to a pistol instead of the dagger and taking Endless Throws and Wild Gunsman as the primaries, which allows crit chance and damage to scale on all of our ailments as we stack a ton of them, and then fire all shots off so it doesn't just hit the bosses with one shot. It will completely unload all of its projectiles, and then we can increase the number of targets, automatically target in front, though I may take that off, and each one that hits does an AoE damage, which helps with clear speed. So this is viable, but it's not pushing the highest ends of the levels. With that comes the gear next. A lot of the affixes that I've found that seem to benefit the gear the best, or the build the best, primarily based around the +2 ailment stacks inflicted, whereas currently I have +2, +1, and +1, and these can be obtained by challenging the Untainted and finishing towards the end of the map. I've been running 121 Untainteds just to try to get a high enough roll, 118s and 121s, which I have been able to confirm drop the +2. Aside from that, primarily we want frost damage on spells, which we can also pick up using a gem here to make sure that it is our highest elemental damage added to spells. The reason for this is it allows the Solar Fall and the Anomaly to freeze, as well as their primary attributes. But since Tear of Ethereal converts frost to fire, we don't freeze with Tear of Ethereal, we keep the burn and shock for massive damage stacking. Then to our attacks, we need to of course add Rend and Toxic. Well, really just Toxic if we're using Bleeding Edge, since it comes naturally with Rend on it. Beyond that, some things that we focus on with the gear is % elemental status ailment chance score. So as you can see, we have 315 on the Catalyst and 335 on the Dagger. One thing we did discover today through testing is that these elemental status ailment chance scores on one-handed weapons apply at half efficiency. So between the two of them, they say they give me 650% ailment chance, but they really only give me 325% ailment chance. And feel free to check my stream. I may put a clip on that of where we were going through calculating all the numbers, but we were able to determine that each wisdom point gives 1 ailment chance score point at base, and then the tree has about 192% ailment chance added for elemental, which gets us to like 1800, and then putting each of those on added about 1,000 apiece. Other affixes of mention are percent damage, percent cooldown reduction, which can come on the helmet, the body, and the pants. Percent transfer time reduction, wisdom, rage and willpower cost reduction, which can come on the shoulders and the gloves, as well as resource generation. And then of course any life, increased all resistances, flat and percent, same with health, flat and percent, help boost our survivability, which definitely could use a hand. On the boots we do get the availability of percent movement speed, to which I have a perfect roll 40 here, which helps us zip around a little bit better without having an actual movement skill. My recommendation for gear is to go heavy on the paulders and the pants, just because that would give at least a percent block chance with the weapons that we're using, so that we can mitigate some damage. And then any sort of, and then mainly bruiser on the rest of the gear, so that way we get health and all resistance balanced. As you can see, I've mainly got heavy, which is why my health is as low as it is. So one of the questions I get a lot is about leveling with the build. And while I was leveling, I was using, first off, consuming embers, which would be an easier spell to start with than the Tear of Ethereal, because the Tear of Ethereal we need to get to all the way to level, I'm trying to remember what level that is. It's about level 35 before it finally is valid for applying dots. So my recommendation, you could use Thunderstrike, as it's a quick hitting attack. You could also try to use Infinity Blades or Consuming Embers like I did, Arctic Spear. I definitely recommend using Anomaly as leveling for the CC that it provides. And then we need a physical skill to counterbalance, so we can bounce our rage and willpower back and forth. And for that, some of the better options I've found. The Avenger auto turret works, but you really need a flak launcher before it's very viable. Otherwise it's just a pain to place it and the boss moves and doesn't do any damage. Or you can use Bleeding Edge from the beginning, even before you get any of the crazy rolls on it, because it has no cooldown and uses quite a bit of rage, so it's good at converting that back. You can even use Blade Storm as a movement skill, which would burn through your rage and put it back into willpower. I've also tested, like I said, Gunslinger Brand. Mark of Impurity is good to have early on, because that can definitely help with some of the boss fights and burn them down pretty quickly. That would be my recommended skills there. And then another one that definitely helps with leveling is Livor Mortis as anything squishy or anything caster, because it would allow you to basically taunt bosses and tougher enemies, and then position all your spells and stack all your dots on them while they fight with your Livor Mortis. Or even early in game, he survives really well. Another powerful spell for leveling is Bulwark of Dawn, which in early levels will pretty much fully heal you on every tick, and once you get Divine Omnipresence, it will follow you around, so you can cast it and walk around in some of the boss fights. So that way, anything that doesn't one-shot you pretty much didn't do anything to you, because you heal right away. Onto the passive tree. Here is where we sit currently, and so what we've done is we have focused on the ailment stats in Scholar, as well as taking an extra willpower and rage, cooldown reduction, cost reduction, And we've come up into the Kabbalist for Insidious Decay. For the time being, we have avoided Primordial Insights, as there's no evidence yet that it currently works, and there's a lot of speculation that it doesn't. We have also avoided Immortal Offering, as I have found that triggering certain spells will then change the attribute of other skills, and you will lose 2 to 3 of your ailments that you can possibly apply. But we definitely take Power of the First Men and Grievous Afflictions, as well as all the status ailment damage in through here. Then as we wrap around, we can come up into Time Weaver and grab our extra ailment stacks. So this would put us at 30 stacks between the 10 here and the 10 here. And then Time Cannot Heal, I have found works really well with Bleeding Edge, since we are applying stasis from our anomaly, which allows the Bleeding Edge to hit, do its damage, and then 1.5 seconds later it will deal 120% of its damage. So effectively doubling the DPS of our Bleeding Edge after a slight delay, which really helps melting the bosses, because once you start stacking the ailments on there and then you get a good crit. I have crit with this build just shy of 1 million damage, and so to be able to hit that and then immediately hit it again right afterwards definitely helps burn those down. We also take use of Dire Junction with the practiced stamina as well to try to reduce the chance of getting one shot. Now I have found in higher level expeditions that doesn't matter as much. We're still getting one shot. It doesn't take a whole lot of damage when you only have 32,000 life, and things hit really hard once you get up there. So we're still kind of playing around with that, but I definitely do recommend it earlier on. Then we come over into Ranger, where we pick up Persistence Hunting. Since we are always applying Anomaly for stasis as well as freeze, we get a free 25% damage to everything. And then we also take Meditative Focus, which increases damage when you're far away from enemies. So we freeze them and step back, and we have 35% increased damage there as well. And this reduces the distance you have to be away. One thing I would recommend, if you are leveling with Consuming Embers, the Archeon's Teaching here, which adds 1 projectile, definitely helps with clear speed, as well as the modifier that allows it to pierce and no longer explode. I found that helps very early on with applying through packs and through bosses when things try to spawn in front of you. Then we come over into Warlock here, where we pick up Duty to Exterminate as well as Twisted Obligation, both of those, to give ourselves more willpower and more rage, and focused for the wisdom. Something else I've been adding today is coming up into Eos and following into Dawn's Pious Striker, as well as Sudden Death, which allows us a 15% cull effect on anything hit by sacred damage, which we are activating with our Solar Dawn. And that helps clear out basically a free 15% more damage multiplier to anything. And then we pick up Quick Draw in Sentinel, as well as a few life nodes and some toughness, and Quick Draw as well in Soldier for some extra cooldown reduction, more life and resistance nodes. And then I've been playing around with some critical hit damage and critical hit chance here with the wild card in the Soldier portion. As far as leveling the tree, the path that I would recommend, and the path that I took and have recommended to many before, is to start out coming up through the ailments. And actually I would come this way to Wisdom, into our Kabbalist, and then try to path directly up to Grievous Afflictions. And the reason for this is, as soon as you find something with cold damage to spells, then all of your spells can now freeze, which is a huge survivability boost and helps keep us alive a lot easier. Once you have Grievous Afflictions, then I would come over into Insidious Decay, which will increase our stacks, as well as allowing for those 2 extra ailments of each, followed by Power of the First Men, Interact Expert, and Artifact Analysis. And the reason for this is it allows us to apply 6 stacks of every ailment that we proc, with 2 different ailments per spell. Now the only ailment that doesn't stack is Freeze, but all the others will stack up to 20 at this point. From here, then we come back into Attrition Strategist. Now I have seen people say on the forums that this does not work. I have checked at least on the character sheet, and the status ailment chance does change on the character sheet as well as the spells, so I do think it is working to some degree at least. I recommend picking up the elemental status ailment first, since the primary damages you're going to be focusing on are freeze and fire. From there, we start picking up other ailment nodes around in our Kabbalist, as well as the extra willpower and rage, as it really helps out early on. And then I would recommend pathing over to our Dire Junction. And from here we can come up into grabbing our ailment stacks as well as survivability, and then step over into Which Time Cannot Heal. The next pathing that I would take is coming over to Persistence Hunting for a free 25% damage, as well as Meditative Focus, at least the first node. Then following into Warlock to grab the extra resources and the extra wisdom. From here, a lot of it is just playing around with balancing out what you need next. If you're starting to feel the cooldowns be an issue, you can grab this cooldown node very easily. You can also, for 2 points, grab each of these cooldown resistant nodes for 30% cooldown resistance. And then I would add in things like Death from Afar to increase that damage, as well as some ailment chance over here. And then from here, we would probably head into our Aether Call to get that extra 15% of killing the boss right away. A cheap 12% status ailment chance score node right there. And then I would start grabbing some of the cost reduction as well as attributes. And we can start adding health from there to again help with survivability. And there we are, back to where we were, more or less, with the tree at level 77. On the attribute side, what we have mainly focused in is wisdom and ferocity. Like I said, the wisdom, we gain 1 ailment chance score per wisdom, and by aiming to get this in the 35 to 40% range on base ailments, what that allows us to do is our melee attack, or our weapon attack, we are in the 37 to 40% chance range. On our freeze, on all of our skills, we are nearly 60% chance, as well as our other ailments being in the 35 to 40% range. And then our tier of ethereal is nearly 60% on each, and that is due to the weapon and the catalyst primarily. Another option, you can take a percent material chance and a percent elemental chance on each of your weapon and catalyst, 1 on each, and that would bring both of the ailments into the 53-54% range. Now if we're looking at min-maxing and theory crafting this as far as it can really go, one thing I would recommend is the trial belt, absolutely, which would allow us to apply Mark of Impurity without casting it. The bonuses that gives are just insane. I have not had the pleasure of having one myself, but I have played with some people who do, and it helps with clear speed immensely. The other piece that helps drastically with our clear and our damage ramp up are +2 ailment stack inflicted affixes. So these can roll on rings, amulet, and belt. And it can be +1 or +2. Now the power of this comes in the fact that our base hit deals 1 ailment stack. Based on our tree, we do 2 more, which takes us to 3. And then we have a 100% chance to double that. We apply 2 different ailments per hit. So if we had +2, +2, +2, assuming we have the trial belt, that'd be an extra 6 ailments per hit, which turns every hit where we proc an ailment into 9 of one ailment and 9 of another, and then a 100% chance to double that to 18 of each, which would allow us with 1 proc of Tear of Ethereal to be 18 shock and 18 burn, or 2 proc to max us at 30. Our Mark of Impurity, which starts at a curse stack of 10 with this setup, would then basically max at 30 every time it procs. So every time it spreads, everything would have a 30 stack curse, which is a 34% damage multiplier. So those affixes there would allow us to greatly improve our stacking much faster, and then we can imagine with Bleeding Edge triggering on all those ailment stacks, having 7 different ailment stacks that can go to 30, plus the 1 for freeze, which would give us 211 stacks, boosting the damage of Bleeding Edge to insane levels. And even if you don't have the trial belt, having another +2 affix there makes it even bigger, because then you have 8 plus the 3, and then doubled is 22 on the first ailment trigger. This is what I understand of the game. This is my thoughts on it, and there are some things that are a little hard to tell, and we're all trying to figure it out together. So any feedback would be greatly appreciated, but I think for now I have figured out as much as I can with the build in its current state. Some of my plans going forward are either to focus on a pure cast that does not rely on ailment stacking, or go with a pure ailment staff build, which I think is possible with a unique pair of boots, belt, and pants that allow us to cast shadow spells with rage cost. So then we could bring in our Infinity Blades as our rage spell, and then with the trial belt we could drop Mark of Impurity and go pure caster with a staff. So those are some of the things I'm working on over the next couple of days to try to see how I want to take this in another direction and start up another build. I will be adding to this as any patches come along or any new information comes out to try to see how high we can really push it, and definitely if any changes to Bleeding Edge occur, we will update that as well. Appreciate those of you who have stuck around to the end, and look forward to trying to put out more content for Wolcen in the future, and hoping that the devs can get a lot of these bugs worked out and finish some polish on what otherwise is a really fun game when it's working, and a very beautiful game. So I've got a lot of hope for the dev team and for Wolcen as a game and an entity and a community, and look forward to continuing to be a part of that in the future. Thank you very much, and remember, stronger together, always.